Hello everyone. Today we will talk about nested if else statement. So whenever we see the word nested, it means that nested word apply to some structure. And that structure can be the repetition structure or the conditional structure. So nested structures mean that we have the structure within another structure. And here we are talking about nested if, and also we will talk about nested if else statements. So what does it mean that we have if else statement blocks within another if else statement block? Nested if statements, use of if statements within another if block. You can see that if statements start from this point. We have the keyword if, and within parentheses we have to write Boolean expression, and this Boolean expression results in either true or false. So if it gets true, we will enter into the block of if. And how we can recognize the block? The block starts from this brackets, open brackets, and this is closed bracket. And whatever resides within these brackets is actually the block of this if statement. So when we come into this block, we whatever the statements we have, we execute that. And when we go forward, we find that there is another if block. So you can see that if another Boolean expression, and then it will execute in the same manner as this outer if block executed. So as we encounter a block of if within a block of if, this structure is within this structure if block, so it is actually the nested if blocks, nested if statements. You can see that this is one of the simplest version of the nested if statements, in which we have the outer block of if, and within that outer block we have inner block of if. Only two layers, the outer layer and the inner layer. For the more advanced versions and the variations of nested if statements, we can have another inner block within an inner block, and this process may continue until we have some resources issues. Nested if else statements. In the previous slide, I've told you about if statements. Now it can be extended to the if else statements. Use of if else statements within another if block or else block is called nested if else statements. You can see that here we are talking about the structure if else. So actually you have the two steps, either if or you have to go to the else part. So within the if part, you may have another if or if else block. And when you go towards the else part, in that part too, you may have the if or if else statement. So any of the variations can occur in the nested if else statement. Let's see. Now come towards the case one of the if else statements. We have the if else block within the if part and the else part as well. You can see that the Boolean expression 1 gets true or it can get false. But if this Boolean expression gets true, we only in this condition we will enter into this block. And when we come into this block, we see that there is another block of if else. And if this expression, Boolean expression 2 becomes true, only in that condition we again enter into this inner block. So when the expression 1 is true and the expression 2 is true, then only this part and this part of the program will be executed, and else part would be skipped, and this outer else part would also be skipped. But what if this Boolean expression get false? So if this get false, what happens that this complete if block will be skipped, and we will directly come towards the else part. And within the else part, when we enter into its block, we will see that there is another if else block. So what happens that if another Boolean expression 3 gets true, we only in that condition we will come into this part. If it's false, we will come to the else part. So there can be any variations depending on the condition, that depending on the Boolean expression, whether its result is true or false. So if it's true, we can only, in that case only, we can enter into its corresponding block. Otherwise, we cannot enter into that block. We will go to the else part of that block, corresponding else block. So we may have different versions of nested if else statements. If one of the variation can be we don't have the else part within the if block. We have only the if block within a if block, and we can have if else within the else part. And in another variation of the nested if else, we can have this if else within the if block, and we don't have this else part. Another variation, if we talk about, it can be possible that we have the complete if else within this if block, but in the else part, we have only if part and no else part. So as we are doing the different variations of nested if else block, you may think about that, what if we skip the if block? Can we do that? No, it's invalid. We can't skip this if block and just we are having this else block. If we do that, this would be invalid, and it's not according to the grammar rules of this programming language. Now come towards the quick example of nested if statements in which we are going to declare a variable a, b, and we have assigned 100 value to a and 200 value to b. And we are applying conditions on the values of a and b. So in the outer if statements, we are checking that the value of a equal to 100. If this statement is true, then in that case only we can come into the block. And within the block, we encountered that we have another block of if statements, and we see that if b equal to 200, then in that case, we will execute this statements that the value of a is 100 and b is 200. But what if this condition is false? We will not execute this part and we will come out of this block. And there's another variation that if this value of a is not equal to 100, then again this block would not be executed. But as in this program, we have hard coded the value of a and b, assign 100 to a and 200 to b, then in this case, this would be true and this would also be true. So this would be print on the screen that value of a is 100 and b is 200. And after the execution of this if statements, we will execute the following statements. So whether it executes or not, these statements would be executed in any case. That the exact value of a is a. So whatever the value of a, it would be displayed on the screen. Exact value of b. So whatever the value of b it would be displayed on the screen. So the value of a is 100 and b is 20. This is the output, which is this statement. This would be displayed on the screen. Then again, we have the exact value of a is this. Exact value of a is 100, as we have written a without the double quote. So it's actually the variable, and the value contained by a would be displayed on the screen. Then exact value of b would be displayed on the screen, which is b having the value of 200, and 200 would be displayed on the screen. Here is another example. You can see that we have declared variable number, and we are prompting the user to enter an integer. And using cin, we are going to take input from the user. So whatever the value entered by the user will go into this variable number. And we are applying condition on this variable number that if the number is greater than 0. So this is one of the Boolean expression that we are going to check whether it's true or false. So whatever the number the user enters, we have a check on that. If that number is greater than 0, then we have to print that you enter the positive integer, and we will display the that number that is entered by the user. And if it's false, we will come toward the else part. So we will come towards the else part, and when we enter into the else part, we will see that there is another if statement, and we will check that whether the number is less than 0. If it gets true, we will display a message that you enter a negative integer. So whatever the number entered by the user would be displayed at this point. And what else? If this statement gets false, we will come towards the else part of that. and we displayed that you enter 0. It means that the user didn't enter the positive integer, neither he entered the negative integer, he actually entered 0. So when we come out of this block, we see that we have this statement, and this statement must be executed whether it's true or false, whether the condition within this if-else block true or false. This have to be displayed on the screen, that this statement is always executed because it's outside nested if-else statement. So this is how this program will work. The thing that you have to remember that we are talking about the nested if else statements, and you will see different variations of structures if else within the if else blocks, and whatever resides outside this nested if else block would be executed in any case if the conditions associated with these if else blocks true or false. So here comes another simple example to understand the nested if else. Here's the statement of the program. Consider an example of a program statement or a segment that accepts a gender code and prints gender according to that code. So here is a serial code. If the gender code is F, you have to print female. Else, if the gender code is M, print male. Else, print invalid code. So two codes are important. If entered code is F, it means that you have to print the female. If the entered code is M, so you have to print the male. If other than F and M, it means that it is invalid code. So the flow chart of this program is that if you come towards this flow chart, you can see that you have to enter the gender code, user will enter the code. And on this code, we have to apply the condition. If it's F, if it's yes, then you have to display female. If it's not, then you have to go to the other end, which is the else part. And within the else part, you have another condition, so whether it is male, M or not. If it's M, then you have to display the male. Else, you have to display the invalid code. So you are checking all the conditions of entering these codes F, M, and if he has entered none of these codes, it means that he has entered some invalid code. So here is the C++ program. You can see that to take a gender code, you may have to declare a variable. And here you can see that we have declared gender code and its name is meaningful. Remember that we have to select such variable names that are meaningful. And this variable shows that it is going to take the gender code. So after declaration, you have to print the message that enter F for female or M for male. So when the user sees this message, he will either enter F or M, but there is a case that user may enter some other letter or something other than that. So whatever the value entered by the user will go into this variable gender code. And then if gender code equal to F, so we are applying condition on this code. If it's equal to F, we have to display the female. Else, within an else statement, we have another if else. So it becomes nested at this point. That if gender code equal to M, we have to display male. Else, we have to display invalid code. So another if nested if else structures to strengthen your concept about it. Following pseudocode is an example of nested if else. If student's grade is greater than or equal to 90, print A. Else, if student grade is greater than or equal to 80, print B. Else, if student grade is greater than or equal to 70, print C. Else, if student grade is greater than or equal to 60, print D. Else, print F. So you are actually going to check all the marks of the students, and according to marks, you are going to print its grade. So it's a complete grade card. So here is a code corresponding C++ code, the specific code according to that pseudocode. We have to check that whether the grade is greater than or equal to 90, then we have to C out, which is used to print any string on the screen. Here we are going to print A on the screen. Else, if grade is greater than or equal to 80, then we have to print B. Else, if grade is greater than or equal to 70, we have to print C. Else, if grade is greater than 60, greater than or equal to 60, we have to print D. And then again, in the else part, we are going to print this grade F. So we are actually going to check all these conditions in which range the student grade lies. So according to that, we have to print its grade. If grade is greater than or equal to 90, first four conditions will be true. It means that if the grade is greater than or equal to 90, so the grade would also be greater than or equal to 80, 70, and 60 by default. But only the statement which is associated with this if part would be executed. Only A would be displayed on the screen if grade is greater than or equal to 90. If it gets true, this part would be executed. And else part, this complete else block would be skipped. You can see that we have if and this is else, and this is a complete else block. And within else block, we have another if else. And the else part of this, we have another if else. And within this else part, we have another if else. So you can see that actually we have the if else statements within the else part of if else statement. You don't have the nested blocks within the if part of if else, but you have the if else block within the else part of the if else statements at each stage, right? So you have the cout statement. After the first test will be executed. After the cout is executed, the else part of the outer if else statement is skipped. So if this condition is true, the else part, this complete else part would be skipped.